Well, hello, welcome to this week's episode of Leadership in Aviation. I am so thrilled to have one of who I think is the brightest leaders in aviation, especially in business aviation, with us as guest today. Joe Damato is a senior vice president at the National Business Aircraft Association, affectionately known as NBAA in the industry. And Joe is over professional development for the NBAA, and she is a dynamo. Joe, I can't wait to hear what you have to talk about today. Will you start by telling us what that encompasses?
Oh, well, first of all, Renee, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be part of the Aviation Collective. I've seen the wonderful group of leaders you have been speaking with over the years. And so honored to have an opportunity to share time with you. Professional development is definitely my touchstone. I love helping people advance in their careers. I love when people get excited about getting started in business aviation. I love the ways we can retain them when we talk about their own individual professional development journeys. And in business aviation, the freedom for them to map that out. There is no one map. There are so many. And I love watching them advance in their careers. And so at NBAA, there are a number of ways our members, individuals can do that. They can come to in-person events. They can connect with us through virtual learning. We can collect them into cohorts so that they can create peer networks. There's volunteer opportunities. And it's really fun to watch someone who you see them walk in the door on day one and they're excited about business aviation. Where am I going to go? And then you still know them after 15 and 20 years, and you've just gotten to watch their stars take off. I love what I get to do at NBAA.
Well, one of the things that I love about NBAA is that you have a 40 under 40 acknowledgement every year, and you also have some specific outreach for young professionals that you call YoPro. And then coincidentally, you're on the Youth in Aviation Task Force, which I know has a longer name, but that's what I've affectionately dubbed it. Would you talk a little bit about leadership specifically to the millennials and Gen Z? Because I think that's different than what we experience in the older generations who tend to dominate aviation.
There's been a generational change, and I guess that's a tale as old as time, literally. Those of us that get to call ourselves veterans just have the pleasure of welcoming new people into the industry. Maybe the change for our generations and those that are coming after us is how quickly the industry has changed, technology, equipment. So many of the tangibles and the ways we communicate certainly are different than when we came into the industry. And then also an appreciation for the values that you're looking for in your employer or in your industry or in your networks. And I love that we've connected with our 40 under 40s, that we have identified young professionals in the industry, or they've identified themselves. You know, they want to be part of something bigger than the place where they get their paycheck. They want to know that they're part of this dynamic industry where they feel like they're aligned with the mission, that what their company is doing or what they see NBAA is doing, or aviation as a whole through work like the Women in Aviation Advisory Board, the Youth Task Force for access to youth American jobs in aviation. They want to see themselves in that mission. So when I think about today's leaders or our up and coming leaders, these younger generations, I love finding out what is their why, what is motivating them. Why did they find us? How are we going to keep them here? And I know we're all reading, it's not just about the compensation package. So much of it is, what is the culture I'm a part of? What is the team that I'm on? And as I examine my personal values, do they align with where I'm spending the bulk of my time professionally? And for those of us, I'm a Gen Zer. No, I'm not. I'm a Gen Xer. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm raising Gen Zers. We have this generation talk in our house all the time. I'm a Gen Xer, and I'm learning so much from the younger generations, and I'm connecting to okay, what are my personal set of values? How do they align with my company's values? What are my whys and how have they changed over my 20 plus years in this industry? So I'm learning from them, I hope, as much as they are finding us to be mentors to them.
I love that so much. I find all the same important things with the whys. And I think, personally, I think you're spot on with what the whys are for the future generations. The ones behind us, I am also a Gen Xer. So I want to talk a little bit about NBAA's leadership conference. I've attended that. I find it always very inspirational, and I love connecting with the people that are drawn to that event. And you've been a part of that for a long time. So will you talk a little bit about how you've seen that evolve, and then also what it's like as a leader leading leaders and how you've adjusted to some of the challenges with that?
Wow, that's some fun stuff to talk about. I mean, first of all, any part of my job where I get to work with our volunteers and work with our volunteer leaders and be on a team with them, that is some of the best parts of my job. And I've had the privilege of working with NBA volunteer leaders for the 20 or so years I've been at NBAA. And it can be interesting because sometimes the staff person, we don't change, but the leadership of these volunteer committees or of the conferences change year after year. And so I get the privilege of adapting to new leadership styles and learning something from each person versus if I was working with the same group of people over and over again. The leadership conference is a really unique NBA event. It's not focused on the technical. It's not for just schedulers and dispatchers. It's not the International Operators Conference. It's not the tax conference. It's not the maintenance conference. This is leadership, which should apply to every single person who can lead without the title that they carry with them. They can be an emerging leader, an aspirational leader, a current leader. And this 2-day event that we produce every year, we bring in speakers on the topics that are important and relevant to today, who have the tangibles that you'll be sitting in the room saying, I can adapt that right now. I can adapt my communication style to this direct report, who I haven't been able to figure out how we can better align on this project. I can approach this project differently with this new team that I'm working with as a result of the lessons the speaker just shared with me. Or my very favorite topic, goals. I know you and I have talked about this. I function on goals. I need to know what I'm working towards. And I love that the leadership conference typically has a speaker or two who lays out some incredible goal journey in their life. And just through inspiration, makes you think that all things are possible and you can achieve your goals. Our volunteers, I love finding out what their whys are. We have hundreds of volunteers in NBAA, 17 standing committees. So that's a lot of leaders of committees. And typically a good volunteer is someone who's already very busy and very successful in their own lives professionally. And probably they give a lot personally too, to their community, their schools, charities. So when we get the chance to have a volunteer work with us, it's really important we understand their why and the best way to make it meaningful for them and to learn what they're hoping to take away from it, not just what they can give to the effort. And so that's the fun part. It's just that mixed bag of who are we working with next and how are we going to collaborate and what are we going to learn from each other, and making sure that everybody feels like the time was well spent, but also was really enjoyable, that it was a good experience.
Well, I'm going to tell on you just a little bit because I've seen you exhibit these very qualities in your life, that engagement, that being busy, that setting goals. You and I were at a conference recently, and while I was sleeping in on Saturday morning, you were out placing third in a running event. And then while I was at breakfast, I saw you walking past already dressed in your suit, ready to go for the day. So it seems like you're very busy and you're very goal oriented. And I love and admire that about you, Joe. And so I'm going to go somewhere else that you told me that you've been going recently, and that's in learning how to be an executive coach. Can you talk a little bit about how that training has helped you to adapt your leadership to be really in the moment with who you're talking to these days?
Well, first of all, yeah, I didn't know you spotted me, but that's good. Hopefully nobody thinks I blew off the event to run and then just went and ate a dozen donuts. I had a great time at the conference we were at too. Yes, I will absolutely talk about that. The coaching for me was one of those pandemic aha moments. It was realizing I wasn't getting the in-person connection I was used to, that charge from being in a room of our volunteers or going to a conference in a network of my peers. But my Google Meet, which is the platform I started using, the Zooms, my dance card became so full with other people who were craving one-on-one connections, who needed well, I guess I'm going to call it, before I understood what coaching was, they were looking for peer mentoring, not a therapist. Sometimes they were looking for therapy, sometimes some career coaching. And the more I started spending my evenings, once the workday was over, trying to make time for all of these people I was connecting with, I realized there's probably some formal things I could do to become a better active listener and to help people without telling them what to do. And that's really what coaching is. I learned through some formal training in the last 2 years how I can help an individual facilitate a conversation with themselves, how they may already have that answer in there and they just need somebody asking them the right open-ended questions that help them look at a challenge in a new way, reframe an opportunity, set a goal, understand or identify the support they need for success, determine the accountability to make it happen. And that has been, I think, the gift of the pandemic to me, was trying to gain and sharpen that skill set every day and help people on that individual one-on-one basis, because the ones who I'm able to spend time with, they're people I love working with in whatever capacity: colleague, coworker, peer, volunteer. And this industry is going to be a lot less fun and impressive if we lose these good people to other industries or other fields. And so coaching seems to be a way I can help with the retention game one at a time, and then also just develop as a better human. I talk a lot. I know I need to work on my listening. And so also one of those goals I'm setting for myself.
Oh my goodness. So now I want to ask you, in general, what are things you hear that are ways that as leaders in aviation, we've improved over the last 20 years? And what are some areas where you think leaders in aviation really could use some extra attention as they're developing their leadership skills over the next couple of years or so?
Yeah, I think about that a lot. I know you do too. When you're goal driven, it usually means you're results focused. You're accountable to somebody probably above you. In my case, the president and CEO or the board of directors. And so you can't, take your eye off the goals there, but you're not the person who should be doing all the work. The leader should be there to help and guide and advocate for. So the biggest lesson that I try to stick to and be consistent with, and my team knows this, is I don't want to be a problem solver. I want to be a skill builder. It would be, and I think a lot of leaders suffer from this. This is are you a leader? Are you a manager? How are they different? Are you empowering? Are you fixing? I don't want to be the fixer. I've learned now and taking from the coaching to the world of being a manager, I want to help you work through something and then have you grow from building a new skill here and solving this. We've learned, well, this has always been true in aviation, but maybe it's more obvious to us now. We need individuals who can thrive in chaos, who can manage not one, but multiple crises at a time. And that's maybe not something we thought of from a leadership seat that we needed to develop. But my instinct, and I'm sure yours is as well, is we aren't doing any up and coming leaders any favors by making things easier for them, by trying to saying, let me do it, I'll fix it for you. But we are going to put them in a better position to be leaders when we instead help them build the skills where they can thrive in chaos and still make good decisions, be decisive, where we can have them and then grow to where they're inspiring others, where they become the models for how you can grow in your career. And then eventually they're going to realize, I'm sure they already realize, you get to that point where you want to lead the leaders coming up, but you also have to say, and here's the goal. And as kind and empathetic as we want to be to each other, in the end, there's always that goal we're working towards too. And that's where that little bit of grit or hustle needs to come in. It's a new dynamic, but I think, again, we're learning more than the up and comers than we realize every day.
You know, Joe, I think it's really interesting to look at this from a perspective of pilot training, because we have pilots learning how to handle several different emergencies or respond to different things that were unexpected in a very short time frame, capture all of the information that they need to take in to begin to aviate, navigate, then communicate in an emergency. And so as we apply those lessons that pilot training and probably air traffic control training teach us, we can also apply those to the way that we operate as leaders in an industry that's very dynamic and has so many different layers to every kind of political or economic change that we're facing. So I don't know if you hear that from the people that you're leading who are aviators or not, but I think that we're uniquely equipped to be able to respond to a very complex business environment. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Oh, no. I was going to say aviate, navigate, communicate. So I love that we're on the same page there. I mean, that you do have to triage is so important. When you're normal ops, you're probably not intentionally thinking about triaging. It's just something you do. But certainly when you're in a non-standard situation, you have to be able to triage. And so that's definitely a skill set we take from our pilot training into everything we do that's not, in the front of the aircraft. At the same time, I worry that sometimes our technical skills allow us to have blinders on, that we're so used to thinking of things as this is an equation to solve. There is one right answer. There's a linear way to do this. There isn't a short outcome. That especially those of us who have that type of technical training, whatever your technical training is, we probably need to be softened around the edges, and to realize that checklist is not the only way in leadership. That what we've learned in our technical world is going to serve us well, but if we don't already appreciate the human in the loop, not just the machine, that we are going to struggle. And we do see this. We see so many people who are promoted, rightfully so, because their technical skills have shined. They've been wonderful, pilots and humans in a flight department, for example, but suddenly they find themselves in the leadership position. And all those years of going to recurrent for their technical may not have been supplemented by their employer with the leadership skills, the essential skills they need to pair with that, now that they find themselves out of the flight deck more than they're in it. And so that's why things like the leadership conference and other professional development that my team works on are so critical, because I don't want anyone to feel like they're ill-equipped to lead or advance in this industry. But we hopefully can get people to admit, I need a little bit more than just the technical training I get every 6 months or 9 months or 1 year.
Oh my gosh, that is so important, Joe. This is one of the things that we discovered on the Women in Aviation Advisory Board as we were looking at the barriers to promotion and success for women in the industry. And what we found is that this is true for everyone in the industry, not just women, and no matter the age, is that there seems to be a lack of professional development. So I want to ask you, and I'm totally putting you on the spot here. I want to ask you what you think companies can do to help build that out a little bit better. What things could they be aware of, or what kinds of programs could they put in place? And then as individual leaders, what things can we take on our own to create or to build our own professional leadership skills?
Oh, well, I'm glad that you asked me that. And I think I'm going to answer it in reverse. So start with the individual first, right? I mean, we all bring something different to the table. A lot of times when I'm at something like the leadership conference, I hear from people, this was great. If only so-and-so from my company was here, because you know what? They really need to hear all of this. But I don't always encounter the same people who come to me and say, I'm so glad I was here. I really needed all of this. There's always that person who's not in the room that you think needs this. So I think first of all, we all just need to gain some more self-awareness that none of us are perfect. We all have room to grow. And if we don't have the type of supervisor who's going to show us the mirror and be able to point out some of the things we can work on, then I'm a huge fan of peer mentoring, of asking some of your friends and peers to hold up the mirror and kindly but constructively let you know where you could soften some edges, or where they think you could put in some more time. And you and I know there's so many assessments out there that people can take advantage of too. They're not very expensive, but you can learn what type of communicator you are. You can learn what type of person you are in conflict and how you resolve that. You can learn your strengths, and all of those things will also tell you, here are your top strengths and here are your lowest strengths. We don't even have to call them weaknesses, but self-awareness, I think, is really important. Relying on some people to help you there. And then for a company, any company that can offer those types of things, that might consider bringing in a coach, because a supervisor isn't always the right person to also wear the coaching hat or the mentoring hat, depending on what the employee needs. But typically there are resources that are accessible, sometimes only to the C-suite. And it would be wonderful for companies to think, if this is important enough that our senior executives have coaches, isn't it important that we think how every level of the organization could benefit from something like that? And so I just would encourage everybody to be curious about if it's good at the top, how is it also good through all other levels of the company, and self-awareness and communication skills. In the end, any stress I encounter at work, it's all interpersonal. It's just, we got our wires crossed somehow, or I am not offering information in a way the other person is receiving it that it's helpful to them. And so I need to walk around it and look at it from a different perspective. If we can get better at that, we're all going to do great. I guess the whole world, not just aviation.
That is so true. So what's the biggest leadership lesson that the pandemic taught you?
Not everything is the end of the world. It really, I would say that the pandemic gave me perspective. It told me that there truly aren't enough hours in the day, and that I probably had to take some of the pressure off myself and find a new way to get organized, to start in on my work, or to lead my team, so that if I was carrying around some stress at my level, that it wasn't something that everybody felt like, okay, the sky is falling for everybody. How could I lead through, what did I call it? Thriving through chaos. I think that was the lesson. We all, fine-tuned or just got a crash course in thriving through chaos, because we're all still here and we're smiling about it. We're a little more tired, but hopefully we've all grown as individuals and as humans and teammates and colleagues.
So if there were one thing that you could tell the next generation of people coming into aviation that's hopeful about this industry, what would it be?
There's room for everyone there, and especially business aviation. There is not a linear path, and embrace that. You can be patient, you can be curious, and you can find something where your why connects with an organization's why. Your values align, you feel part of something a bit bigger than yourself. If you're adventurous, you can be adventurous. If you're introverted, you can be an introvert. But don't just grab at the first thing. There's never been a better time to shop for the perfect fit for you, and to recognize that what's great for you may be totally different for a person coming up side by side with you in the industry. And that's all okay.
I love that so much. What a great perspective and what great advice. I wonder if, since you're an expert on business aviation, you could talk a little bit about what the differences are between careers in business aviation or commercial aviation, because I think a lot of times the airlines get a lot of airtime about careers. And you and I both know that business aviation is a thriving industry that also needs a lot of personnel. So for someone who's weighing, is business aviation or general aviation a good way to go, or should I be leaning into an airline job? What would you say?
Yeah, well, I get to have this conversation, especially with collegiate aged students often, including my own, who will be a collegiate aviation student in the fall. And I don't think he's determined 121 or 91 or 135, and that's okay. He has all the information. For every 10 people that are there, there's going to be different things that appeal to different people. And in my opinion, probably 8 out of 10 are going to love the comfort of the 121 world. And I'll just use piloting as an example here. But if you really like everything organized at a right angle on your desk, following that checklist, following that map, then you could be 16 or 17 years old right now and truly understand how to go from 0 flight time all the way to right seat at a major airline in the next 6 to 7 years. And then from there, just visualize your next 35 or 40 years until retirement. And my other half, that is the path that he chose, and it has served him and our family well. There's the predictability, the stability, the having a union who can take care of negotiating some of the things that as an individual you don't want to have, the consistency of equipment and seniority and all of those things. And then we're going to say there's those 2 people out of 10 who just can't imagine everything being that tidy. That for them, their why is adventure, is being more adventurous, not wanting to have memorized their employee number and think about where that number fits as part of another 10 or 11 or 12,000, but thinking that their number, if there is one, is part of hundreds of thousands or millions. That they want to do additional tasks in addition to operating the aircraft. They want to understand the business part of aviation. I would love to negotiate for fuel. I'm very interested in helping select our next aircraft or building a hangar that is environmentally friendly. They see themselves in so many other roles. So let's find those. And let's celebrate what makes everybody's why unique. And so if you are 8 of 10 who are the right angle, everything organized, there's a path already laid out for you. And if you're the other 2 out of 10 and you're just thinking, I don't want to know what the next 45 years look like. I want to shake it up a little bit. I want to know that on my off days, I'm going to be working on my music and trying to see if I can, play in coffee shops in the Pacific Northwest. Well, then great. Business aviation can probably make that possible for you to do both. So it's really interesting to interact with our future industry members of the whole aviation collective and learn where they see their path going. But then I always say I was only ever going to be the 121 pilot. That was my only goal. And I took a hard left turn into business aviation. And now my mission is I accidentally built a career in business aviation. I want to help students intentionally build careers in business aviation.
So what does that look like from the task force that you're on? And I know that you can't talk about the specific recommendations that you're going to be making yet, but from the heart of the task force, where do you see that intentionality coming from the industry as a whole that could be beneficial?
Yeah. Oh, well, so I love being part of the Youth Access to American Jobs in Aviation Task Force. Part of our specific charge is that sweet spot of sophomore, junior, and high school who can be in aviation and be employable very quickly after they finish their high school career, whether they're taking on a collegiate track, a technical school track, earning a credential that allows them to be employable right away, apprenticeships, all of those things are part of it. But we recognize and have spent a good amount of time on going all the way down to your preschool level, and how do you really engage children at different ages and appeal to them this concept of a job or career in aviation. And we have focused a lot on even those of us who are in aviation. When we get a question from a neighbor or a neighbor's son, we don't have the secret decoder ring that says, here's all the information you need to understand everything you should know about potentially considering a career in this industry. And of course, there's so many jobs you can do. We hear about pilots and maintainers and air traffic controllers, and then you and I could probably sit here and name a couple hundred job titles that people don't even know exist because of all that goes into managing an aviation function. Our task force really wants to focus on not only awareness that these careers exist, investing the guardians, parents and guardians, and the educators, whether they're teachers or guidance counselors, and truly understanding the viability of this career path. Certainly, and especially, we've learned mothers of daughters need more convincing than anybody else that a career in the technical world is possible. So I know that's something that's really important to me. Okay, so once we've got awareness, how do we encounter the other barriers, specifically the financial barrier and how expensive it can be to start a career in aviation, and understanding that there's payoff, but it can be a lot of sacrifice, and how can we soften that and make that and not as burdensome. So we're focused on funding, and then especially underrepresentation. So I'm raising two sons. I obviously have access to a lot of information to give them, and that is wonderful and fortunate for them. But very, very close to where I live in South New Jersey is Camden, New Jersey. And a high school I was able to spend some time at right before the pandemic is 1 mile in distance from my son's high school. And along that same highway, 10 miles in the other direction, is our local general aviation airport. My son takes lessons at that general aviation airport. The students I talked to just 1 more mile down the road didn't even know that on that same highway, there's a general aviation airport within 10 miles of their school. And that it's possible for them to go and do a discovery flight, spend time at the airport, that there are camps there. So awareness is great, funding is great, but access to the information that underrepresented groups who can really help us address our workforce shortage, but also increase the safety of this industry through diversity of thought, through different experiences. That is just going to be a boon for aviation. So the task force is focused on all of those things, and certainly very eager to dive into the Women in Aviation Advisory Board recommendations and the document that's published recently, so that we can see where we align. But even just a high level conversation this week has shown us how aligned we are and how important it is that two separate groups have reached so many of the same conclusions, and can only strengthen our recommendations for change.
Well, Joe, I think all of that is amazing, and I'm definitely interested in working more together on that, as I know that both of our groups are. You've inspired me so much today on this podcast to really dive in and work harder to bring other people into the industry, but also help develop those leaders that are in the industry already. How can people volunteer with NBAA or with you, with this task force, to really make aviation and advances in aviation leadership more accessible to others?
Yeah. So a great way to connect with me, I would say, is LinkedIn. I know you're going to share the podcast, and that's probably the most direct way to get to me without worrying about an email address. For anybody who wants to volunteer, if they're an NBAA member, same thing. They can contact me through the NBA website or through LinkedIn. And a lot of times it's trying to understand where they want to spend their time, what they're passionate about. They might say, well, I'm in aviation and I'm passionate about safety. I want to be on the safety committee. But then a conversation with them might help us realize that they're very interested in airport access or DE&I or leadership development. We're able to kind of suggest some other things they might want to look into more. For the task force, I think I would tell people our recommendations are probably 4 to 6 months beyond yours, but there hopefully will be many meaty things, especially to the industry, that people can do to get involved. Even during our most recent public call, I was getting messages on LinkedIn from people who were watching the public meeting asking, how can I get involved? This is exactly what I do in my local area. I'm so excited and eager about what I'm hearing. We're so aligned. And so I know that there's going to be room for everyone. And it's a big enough imperative that we need everyone. So that's the good news, is there's room for everybody to roll up their sleeves and make a difference.
I love that. I remember being at a breakfast at a base event a couple of years ago when we still had breakfast at base events. Hopefully we're back to that this year. But I had someone at the table ask me, how do we get more women in aviation? What's the magic key? And I said, well, do you have a daughter or a niece or a female neighbor? And he said, yes. And I said, have you taken them flying? And he said, no. And I'm like, well, could you? And like, maybe could you take a couple of their friends? Because that's how we interest people in aviation, is by exposing them to that. So for everyone listening, I would exhort you to find someone that you can influence, maybe who hasn't been exposed to aviation in the past, and take them to an air show or on a discovery flight. Get them interested in aviation. It makes all of our jobs a little bit easier in the future. Joe, thank you so much for being here today. This has been a great conversation.
It's been my pleasure. And thank you, Renee, what you're doing and spreading this message about leadership and the importance of how we can help emerging leaders grow in this amazing industry. It's so important. So thank you.